Hello, my name's Nigel Linge, and it's my great pleasure to have been invited to speak at the Greater Manchester Archaeology Festival 2020. I'm based at the University of Salford, where I hold the title of Professor of Telecommunications. And what I want to focus on today is how we record and preserve an important part of mobile phone heritage. And particularly, I want to focus on the evolution of the camera phone. The mobile phone does create quite enormous challenges for the heritage community. It's a technology which is really less than 50 years old. If we look at the UK, it's only 35 years old because it was on the 1st of January 1985 that the Panasonic VM1 was used to inaugurate the UK's first mobile phone network, that created by Vodafone. If we fast forward to 2020, then people talk about smartphones, exemplified by the Apple iPhone 12. You can see that the technology has evolved beyond recognition. It continues to change every 6 months or so, yet it has had an enormous and dramatic impact on society, thereby justifying why we should seriously think about its preservation and recording it for heritage. But how do you define a collections policy that identifies which of the thousands of different mobile phones that have been produced are worthy of preservation? Everyone will have their favorites, but from a collections point of view, what should we really be focusing on in order to preserve for the future? And one suggestion I'm going to make is that we should focus on themed storylines that follow a particular technology track through that overall history of the mobile phone. And to illustrate that as a possibility, I want to look at just one example today, and that is the camera phone. The camera phone in 2020 is actually celebrating its 20th birthday. It started out life as a quirky accessory that mobile phone manufacturers, quite honestly, didn't want and didn't see any value in. Yet, today, it's become an essential feature that manufacturers now proactively use to market and differentiate their devices. If you look at any datasheet or marketing information for a modern smartphone, there is significant effort put into that to describe the features and the quality of the integrated camera. The fact that it makes a phone call, if mentioned at all, is pretty well at the bottom of the list. The camera on the mobile phone has become a key differentiator. And if you think about it, that one accessory has probably had the greatest impact on society of all of the features added to the mobile phone over its entire history. And I love this quote from photographer Chase Jarvis, who said, "The best camera is the one that's with you." And let's face it, in 2020, that is more likely or not to be the camera on your smartphone. So where did the story of the camera phone begin? Well, it began in Sharp's research laboratories in Japan, where the camera was developed. And from there, they took the idea to Japan's #1 mobile operator, Docomo, who turned it down flat. So too did Japan's second mobile operator, au. However, engineers at Japan's third and smallest mobile operator, J-Phone, welcomed the idea, although their marketing department did not see any value integrating a low-quality camera with a phone that had a relatively low-resolution screen. So it was agreed that 10,000 JSH04 mobiles would be produced, but only 2,000 of those would include Sharp's camera. The Sharp JS04 camera phone version sold out within 6 weeks, whilst the 8000 that didn't include the camera languished on the shelves. This then, launched in November 2000, is regarded as the world's first truly integrated camera phone. Naturally, there are other contenders who claim to be the first, but the J phone truly integrated the camera into the phone and provided a user interface that allowed pictures to be shared easily over the cellular network using the ShareMail picture messaging service. And with that, as they say, the rest is history. Of course, from a heritage point of view, there are only 2,000 of these devices in existence, and that's 20 years ago. I'm very fortunate for Stephen Temple, who actually has one of these in his collection, and he very kindly allowed me to use these photographs. I have to say I'm very envious of his collection, use these photographs in today's presentation. The impact of the camera phone was rapidly seen. Bear in mind that the Sharp JSH04 was launched in 2000. In 2003, camera phones outsold digital cameras worldwide for the first time ever. And moving on to the evolution of the mobile phone into the smartphone, the graph here shows the growth in smartphones as plotted against the decline globally in the sales of camera. And what you can now see clearly is that the smartphone, in the majority of cases, is now the camera of choice. And many people have switched to using only their smartphone instead of, shall we say, a fairly standard point and shoot digital camera. Obviously, at the high end, the digital camera still reigns supreme. But I think this is quite dramatic impact here of how the mobile technology has effectively impacted the camera industry. And some absolutely mind-blowing statistics that show in 2020 there's an expectation that 1.4 trillion photographs will be taken. And if you look at the lower part of this slide, where you've got the three circles that go from 2018 to 2020, of those pictures that are going to be taken, then 90.9% of those are expected to be taken using mobile phones, 1.8% using tablets, and only 7.3% digital cameras. And that 7.3% is a reduction from 10% only 2 years ago. So the camera in the phone has had a dramatic impact on society and on other industries, particularly the camera industry. And it's that transformational impact that I think makes the camera phone a worthy story within the mobile phone heritage that needs to be told, and also could help define a collections policy to preserve it for future generations. And those future generations today are almost certainly engaged in social media, where you can also see mind-blowing statistics driven by the camera phone. Instagram, there are 95 million photos uploaded daily. Facebook would see 300 million photos uploaded every day. And the one that I really struggle to get my head around is YouTube, which says that there are 300 hours of video uploaded every minute and 5 billion video views every day. And the vast majority of those videos are recorded on smartphones. Now, the phone does not exist in glorious isolation. The phone relies on a mobile phone network. Now, in the UK, the first mobile phone network was launched in 1985. And the network has evolved, and today we are talking about 5G, G is generation, the 5th generation of network. So if you're going to put a camera on a phone, you want to be able to share those photographs or at least send them somewhere. And so the network as an enabler in the growth of the camera phone is absolutely critical. And in particular, the evolution of the 2nd generation of mobile phone network, GSM, into what often is referred to as 2.5G, the General Packet Radio Service, which, by the way, the world's first GPRS service was launched in the UK in June 2000 by BT Cellnet. What was special about this network evolution? Well, on the diagram here, if we think about the mobile phones on the left making a phone call, then basically that phone call goes through the infrastructure to make a telephone call. It goes through, if you like, a telephony-based network. What the GPRS evolution brought was effectively a splitting of function over the network. And whilst the telephone calls are made, as indicated here by the arrow, through the blue portion of the network, anything which was data related, and here we are talking about uploading, shall we say, camera pictures, goes not through the telephone network, but through a new portion, which is effectively a separate and dedicated data network. And that's the same portion you would use if you were just browsing the web. So the mobile phone infrastructure, the network, is also evolving to actually support the camera phone on the device. And you can't, not having both parts together means you don't have a viable service. The two have to be symbiotic in how they evolve. So in the UK, the first camera phone, well, was this really a camera phone? The Sony Ericsson T68i actually had a camera phone attachment, as you can see here. But importantly, this ran on the T-Mobile network using the mobile picture messaging service. And it's the first camera phone to actually do that. So that's an important device to have in the collection. Nokia, their first camera phone was the Nokia 7650, shown here in 2002, and this also was linked to the mobile multimedia messaging service. The Sharp GX10, also launched in 2002. Remember Sharp JSH04? This was their first European camera phone, the GX10. And this was voted the best handset at the 3GSM World Congress in 2003. And then we have the Sharp GX30 2 years later. And this is important because it's Europe's first 1 megapixel camera phone. Now there's an obsession with megapixels, and what do we mean? Well, the resolution of the picture that you take using the camera, the quality, the fine detail of that picture is defined by the number of pixels, that's picture elements, that make up the total photograph. The GX30 actually had 1 million pixels in that image. And so you'll find people use megapixels as a way of denoting quality and also differentiating their products in the market. That is, who's got the most megapixels. So the GX30 is important because this breaks the 1 megapixel boundary. The Sony Ericsson Z1010 in 2003 is important because this is the first mobile phone to put a camera facing forwards. Of course, now the selfie. This would, in today's mobile phone, be referred to as a selfie camera. That's one that faces towards the person holding the phone. All of the other camera phones so far shown, the camera was at the rear, facing away from the operator. But this one, the Sony Ericsson Z1010, the camera is now also facing forward. And the launch of the third generation of mobile phone network was actually driven by a belief that the next killer application would be video calling, telephone calls where you could not only hear but see the other person. And so the first launch of a 3G service in the UK came from the new operator 3, who launched their service in the UK on the 3rd of March 2003. That's 333. And they launched with, guess what, 3 devices, as shown here. The NEC E606, the Motorola A830, and the NEC E808, all of which came fitted with front-facing cameras for the reason that 3G was seen as the video calling network. That is, of course, except the Motorola A830 in the center of this picture. It had rather an innovative feature in that the camera, which was actually technically an attachment to the phone, was not 2 cameras, one facing forward, one facing back, but a single camera that could rotate so that it either pointed forward or pointed away. But this idea that you had to now have a camera facing forwards is an important evolution in the mobile phone. And just going along the megapixel story, the Nokia N95 was a 5 megapixel camera. So you're seeing that the mobile phone companies are promoting the quality of the camera. Now, you can also possibly make out that this device also has a front-facing camera, which is at the top right-hand corner. The 5 megapixel rear camera, of course, is at the back of this photograph. And if you want to follow the megapixel growth story and develop a collections policy around mobile phones based on it, then you would perhaps look at some of these devices, the Samsung i8510, the Nokia 808 that pushed the camera up to 40 megapixels, the Honor V20 that's now pushing it up into the mid 40s towards 50 megapixels, and on it goes. And look at the growth in megapixels on the camera, right up in fact to something like the Xiaomi Mi Note 10 Pro, launched this year, which has a staggering 108 megapixel camera. In fact, it has several cameras, not just one. So if you're in a collections policy and thinking about contemporary collecting, you should really have your eye on today's mobile phones if you're thinking that the megapixel growth is a key aspect of the story. But of course, there's more to camera phones than just megapixels. What about the Samsung Galaxy S4 Zoom? Genuinely a mobile phone with a physical zooming lens that would extend out of the body as shown on the right hand side here. This was a 16 megapixel camera. So this is unusual because they don't normally fit zoom lenses of this type onto a camera phone, perhaps for pretty obvious reasons. The way camera phones these days handle optical zoom is to have multiple cameras, and the HTC Evo 3D in 2011 is regarded as the first phone to have dual cameras. So the idea that now the mobile phone doesn't just have one camera, it has 2, 3, or 4 cameras embedded within it. Another important technological step forward, and one that needs to be recorded. Fast forward again to this year, and another example of a 108 megapixel camera is the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G. It comes equipped with 4 cameras. One is for ultra wide angle, one is for wide angle, and one is for telephoto. You've got a depth camera there, and basically the way optical zoom is done on a modern mobile phone is actually to switch between these cameras to see which gives you the appropriate photograph at that time, and then to use something called digital zoom. And for digital zoom to work properly and effectively, you need a very high resolution picture to begin with. Hence, 108 megapixels is one of the reasons why it's so large, is to enable the digital zoom facility. So there are technical reasons, not just about resolution, why you would want to see a lot of megapixels in your original image resolution. There's lots of technological evolutions, but of course there's also the social impact story alongside all of that. So mobile phone heritage, I would say, is certainly worthy of recording and preservation because of its huge impact on society, and of course, within itself, the technological advances that have been achieved. However, and sadly, the mobile phone industry is simply not focused on heritage, and it has no incentive to preserve mobiles as artifacts. Is it because mobile phone heritage is rapidly moving? It's perhaps too rapid to appreciate what is significant quickly enough to collect and preserve it. If you've got phones that are coming out every 6 to 12 months and it's a few years later you suddenly realize it was iconic, then of course it's possibly been and gone and you've lost the opportunity. It means that mobile phone heritage tends to be it has quite a casual attitude to the preservation. Our mobile communications heritage really is at significant risk that in the future there'll be no suitable historical records so that future generations can understand, well, why did that happen? Why did they make a phone like that? Or conversely, here is a phone of the day. Why does it look like it does, and how did we get here? If we're not recording that story and that heritage, how will the future generations of heritage professionals and enthusiasts, for that matter, actually be able to find out about the technology and how it evolved? The problem is for people in the heritage sector, the large number of devices, and I don't mean just the volume, I mean the different models, coupled to their relatively short lifespan, makes it incredibly difficult to differentiate the wheat from the chaff. So what I'm trying to suggest here is if you focused on a theme storyline, then maybe that is the logical strategy to develop your collections policy. And what I've suggested here, and I'm sure there are others you could follow, the camera phone, because of its social impact, could indeed be one of those theme stories which allows you to collect and tell the mobile phone story, or at least that aspect of it. Now, we've only got a short time today, and I'm very grateful in putting this presentation together for help, particularly for Stephen Temple and the fact he has a Sharp J SH04. That is a rare phone, and yet it was the start of the story. Ben Wood, Ben actually runs his own mobile phone museum online, and I do recommend you go and have a look at that. And Mike Short and Andy Sutton, who have very kindly provided me some technical information and helped with the storyline, and particularly thinking about what phones should be in it. You please do have a look at my own website, engagingwithcommunications.com, and on that website, if you look under technology, you'll see that we also have a mobile phone collection. So if you're interested in seeing various mobile phones and so forth, then look under the technology section. Or if you want to see some of the articles and papers we've written, then they're available under publications, and they're all available as a free download. So do please pop along to engagingwithcommunications.com. and I do hope that in this short presentation you found it interesting, and maybe I've stimulated your thoughts about how on earth does the heritage sector preserve technology which is seen by many as still young and therefore possibly not really on the heritage radar, yet has evolved so rapidly that we've already lost some of the knowledge of how we got to where we are today. The camera phone is in 2020 20 years old. That's all. And yet the evolution to today's modern smartphone from the Sharp SH04 has been phenomenal. So thank you for listening. I hope you found it interesting. If you want to get in touch, there's my email. You can follow me on Twitter or indeed pop along to our website. Thank you very much indeed.